Hello everyone, welcome to our very first IVF Life Stories, the new monthly podcast brought to you by the European Fertility Society. I'm Tracey Sainsbury, Specialist Fertility Counsellor and proud member of the European Fertility Society Education Committee, and each month I'll be having a chat with a very special fertility expert who will share their fertility journey with us. You'll be able to watch again via our YouTube channel from the following day. And if you join us live, you'll have the opportunity to ask your own questions too. Please do ask your questions in the chat and we'll get as many of those asked directly to Kate as we can. This evening, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our first special guest, Kate Pleace. Kate is a senior women's health nurse specialising in fertility and the menopause. Kate has worked in this area since 2007 at 2 fertility clinics and also independently providing consultations to patients and training and workshops to healthcare professionals, in addition to lecturing at De Montfort University and now an author too. Kate, welcome.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. Looking forward to chatting, Tracey.
It's great that you could be here. I'm privileged to know a bit more about your journey, but first of all, almost jumping straight in, how old were you when you thought about being a mum? Was it something you thought about when you were young or something when you met the right person?
No, not at all. It was very much when I met the right person. So I think very much in my teens and 20s, I was a typical, I don't want children. That's not for me. And it was very much when I met the right person. So when I met my current husband, Dave, we were in our early 30s. And it was literally then that I thought, actually, it would be nice to have children now I've met the right person. That would be something that, we could look at. So, very much a little bit late in the game. I think I was probably about 31, 32.
Okay. So not late in the game for most fertility clinic patients, but later than you thought it might have been?
Yeah, later than I thought it might have been. I'd had a relationship and marriage that had ended before then and then met someone new. And then a new path had kind of opened up with that right person. It was something that we thought, that would be something that we'd like to do.
Fantastic. And just thinking about beginning to try, I think at that point, were you already working in fertility? How was your professional life at that time?
Yeah, so I'd been working in fertility for probably about 4 years at that point. I'd worked previously at an IVF clinic. I was living in the Midlands at the time in the UK, and then I'd relocated to Essex when I met my future husband, because as we know with healthcare jobs, it's really, really easy for us to relocate. We're quite fortunate that we're in demand. So I was able to relocate and get a job at an IVF clinic local to where my partner lived. And then obviously it was at that point that we decided that we'd like to think about having children.
Knowing you worked in fertility, how long did you try before getting any tests, or were you uber prepared and had done every test beforehand?
I wasn't, as much as we love our patients, I have to say I wasn't probably as organised as some of our patients are who've, come in with notebooks and information that they found online and various supplements. But I did have a little bit of an idea that it might be a bit of a challenge. And that was because when I was much younger, in my late teens and early 20s, I had really irregular periods. It was very, very difficult. And I'd had the marina coil in situ for a few years in my early 20s when I'd started my nurse training. I remember pleading with a gynecologist saying, I'm not planning on having children in my early 20s. I want to do my nurse training. I haven't got time for really irregular periods and, flooding in restaurants and things like that. So I kind of had a little inkling that maybe it might be challenging, but hopefully, it'll be fine. So I think it was probably about 4 or 5 months. And I think the main issue was because I'd had my coil removed, but then unfortunately I hadn't got any periods back since then. So immediately I thought, that's not quite right. So we probably sought help a little bit sooner.
And when you sought help, did you go NHS or working in a clinic? Did you speak to somebody in the clinic?
No, I was I wanted to take advantage of our wonderful NHS. And when we think going back, it was probably in about 2013. So things weren't like they are now. So no, I approached my GP. I didn't kind of think, oh, hey, I'll need IVF or I need treatment. So yeah, I kind of approached my GP, who was very good, did some initial blood works, but did put the referral in, I think probably from me having a conversation and explaining what was happening. He put the referral in, and you think how things have changed. I think it took a couple of months to get a referral through. Wow. Whereas now, I'm telling patients we'll be lucky if it's in a year. So it didn't take long at all. And coincidentally, there was a wonderful doctor who worked sort of hybrid, both with the local IVF clinic and the NHS, and that was the consultant I saw. So that was really nice because I knew her.
Oh, and that's one of the reasons why I asked, because sometimes when you feel comfortable with your team, it can be really tempting to jump straight in and ask somebody outside of your medical pathway. I'm just wondering, as things move towards IVF, how did working in fertility and managing your fertility journey, how did you balance that? How was that for you?
Initially, I very much would say I compartmentalized it. It was almost like I was saying to myself, well, you kind of know everything from procedure wise what to expect, so it should be fairly straightforward. You're so fortunate compared to your patients. So I did very much compartmentalize it. So initially I went through all the NHS tests that a lot of our patients go through, those bread and butter tests, so blood tests. Dave, my husband, had his sperm checked. I had a high cozy, and as a typical healthcare professional, had that in, early in the morning, and then went to work, which probably I wouldn't recommend, because you kind of, you want to put up that brave face, and you want to, kind of say to yourself, yeah, it's no problem. You tell patients that they'll be fine. So initially, it was very much compartmentalized. We had a couple of cycles of ovulation induction, but I didn't respond to the treatment for that at all. And it was at that point that the lovely consultant spoke to me and said, oh, I think we'll refer you for IVF straight away. And she was pretty forward thinking. I think she had a feeling, and she'd already done an AMH test. She said, oh, I've put that through. We don't do it very often on the NHS, but I think it might be useful for you. And again, I got another inkling. I was having an ultrasound scan, and the sonographer did an AFC count, which was really, really low. So already my ears had pricked up, and I thought, this is starting to go down a different route. So yeah, we got the referral, and it was at that point that we kind of had an option, because it was NHS. Then in the UK, you get a choice of maybe 2 or 3 clinics, and we live in North Essex, so it was either the local clinic that I worked at, or it would be going to London. And I just didn't fancy going to London. I really didn't. It just put me off either driving or getting the train. And it was at that point that I thought, no, I'm going to find out if I can have treatment at my own clinic, because it's around it's 20 minutes from my house. My husband works around the corner. So there's so much more to be had for being local. And I say that to patients all the time. I don't know about you. I say, well, think about how long it is to where you live. My husband works shifts, and I just thought it's not going to work getting into London at early hours for, sperm samples or whatever. And I just thought, I'm going to ask. And I trusted who I worked with implicitly. I used to call them my Bourne family. I worked for Bourne. And I thought, I'm going to see if it's possible. And yeah, they said it was.
Just thinking how so many clinics, even now when we're much better informed, can spend so much time focusing on the woman going through the treatment, acknowledging you're a couple going through the treatment together. How did that impact on your relationship when you already knew everybody? How included did you feel as a couple? Were you able to look after yourselves with that? How did you make that work?
I don't think initially that we thought about it. We kind of had an inkling moment when I think we were planning to start our IVF cycle, and we got married at Christmas. And it was then I kind of had that moment and thought, oh, Dave's going to have to hand his sperm sample over to one of the lovely embryologists who was at my wedding, who, I know really well. And initially, I think for me, I kind of took that on board quite a bit. And I remember saying to him, oh, this is going to be really awkward for you. How are you going to find this? But Dave just took it in his stride and kind of said, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just going to turn up, do my sperm sample, and that's what's going to happen. And then he said, I'm going to be waiting for you. But they were really, really thoughtful. They kind of gave me a team of the key people. So not everyone kind of participated in my care, which was really thoughtful. I had, one consultant, a couple of embryologists and a couple of nurses. Not that there was lots of nurses. So I was really fortunate that I had a continuous, team that supported me and Dave. And coincidentally, the day that we had the first cycle of treatment, my egg collection, there was only me on that day, just purely by coincidence. So I think obviously someone was watching upstairs and thought, oh, well, that's fine. So from that point of view, it was much, much easier to kind of handle.
And I think there can be just a buckle down and get on with it. When you said there's a difference between 20 minutes to the clinic where you worked and you knew people felt safe and comfortable. But I'm just acknowledging where you mentioned you had your high cozy and went back to work. But ordinarily, if you're feeling a bit rubbish during your fertility treatment and you need to be signed off, your GP can sign you off for gynecological procedure, post-procedure recovery. Everyone knew what you were going through. Was there a pressure to be at work, or did you cope okay?
I think I put a bit of pressure on myself to be at work, because you're always reassuring your patient, saying, oh yeah, it's fine to do normal life and do things, and often I'd have my kind of monitoring scan first thing in the morning before the other patients, and then I'd load up my locker with whatever fertility drugs I needed. So I think from that point of view, looking back, actually, you think, oh yeah, I did do that. Or I'd see my blood results coming through, because back then we used to use a fax machine, and I used to just hand them to the nurses and go, because I didn't want to kind of start looking at them and then getting a sort of blurred nurse patient scenario going, well, I've looked at my blood results, I've decided what we're doing next. So yeah, looking back, you think, yeah, that did happen.
I'm pleased you've mentioned that as well, because I was going to say, was there any blurring of the boundaries where you figured you'd know what you'd treat yourself and miss your consultant?
Just bypass. So I tried to just kind of, just pass them across and go, because I just thought, no, you can't start kind of, thinking that you can treat yourself, because when it's immediate, when we're not we can't be, fully on the line when we're thinking about ourselves. It's like me saying, well, I'll do my HRT review. Or you've put on weight, oh, never mind. Or you have three chocolate bars, never mind. You do need professional support even for you.
Yeah, a bit of scaffolding, just in case you have a wobble as much as anything else, or to tell you to take time off if you're pushing yourself to keep going and need that break.
Exactly.
How was it? How did your treatment progress? So
the first cycle was okay. I'd known at that point that I had a low AMH and wasn't likely to respond to treatment well. They'd given me medication to induce a bleed. So I knew things wouldn't be great, but I was hopeful. I thought, well, the same as any other patient, you don't know till you start it. And for the first cycle, for a low AMH, it wasn't too bad. I did have the maximum doses of stimulation, but I think by the time I'd had the egg collection, I think they'd managed to collect 4 eggs. So for me, I thought, well, that's not too bad. And then fertilization was 2, so that wasn't too bad. And then I had 2 embryos replaced, but unfortunately the quality wasn't great. So the cycle, unfortunately, wasn't successful.
And when you have that negative outcome and you're having to still go into work, how did that impact on your patient interactions? Was it triggering, or were you more empathetic? How did you cope?
I think I was more empathetic. I wasn't necessarily open with the patients that I saw, because as a healthcare professional, you don't want it to be about you in that point. It's about them. They're coming to you. But if they would ask me directly, then I would answer and tell them the truth. But I wasn't necessarily open with them, but I was definitely more empathetic. I didn't do sort of theatre duties when I was kind of on my 2-week wait, and the clinic were very good. I had counselling. They offered me open-ended counselling. They were very good. And I think that first cycle, you kind of, even though you kind of know what's going to happen and you've looked after people for years and years, you have that hope and that kind of newness about it. And we definitely had that. So although we were really, really upset and disappointed, we kind of we were kind of the newbies at that point, the first cycle, what to expect. And we thought, oh, it's okay. We've got NHS funding over time. We left it probably about 4 or 5 months and thought, no, we'll try we've got the second cycle, we'll try again. But unfortunately, by the second cycle, I didn't respond to treatment at all. So they had to kind of cancel the treatment even before getting to egg collection. And I think that really was probably just as devastating as having a negative result, if I'm honest, because you kind of know that path, it's game over. And I just remember sitting in the scan room and I sat there crying my eyes out thinking, that's it, game over. Nothing happens. So I think in some ways that was probably tougher because you knew that the path was over, and kind of having to phone Dave. I can't remember if Dave was at work, having to phone him and kind of say, yeah, it's not great. And we kind of had to make that decision because, again, we were really lucky. On a positive, we knew if we didn't go to egg collection under the NHS rules at the time, we could have another cycle and possibly have egg donation. And at that point, I certainly wasn't ready for that. You said egg donation. I think, no way, it's not possible. So, but by stopping at that point, it gave us something else to kind of have on the back burner in the future. And I think at that point, we probably had maybe 6-7 months out where we didn't do anything. We carried on. They had to take it back to the NHS to appeal to change what they were asking for. So we carried on rolling that through, but we weren't kind of sure. And over time isn't a healer, but it helps you to understand things a bit more, and you're a little bit more removed from the situation. So kind of having a little bit of a gap and stopping and thinking, hey, actually, it is something we could think about. It is something we could look at. And it was at that point that I got my diagnosis of POI. So it was kind of juggling the two. Obviously, it's not surprising. You've got a low AMH. You've not responded to treatment. You're not having regular periods. And there were probably a few extra symptoms in there that I didn't realise at the time, looking at Dave breathing and being enraged and being more anxious. He's still alive, you'll all be pleased to know. So I think having that gap was really important because a lot of patients always want to rush through, but for us, that gap was really important. We took the time to have a break and decide whether egg donation was right for us. We had implications counselling, and we decided we'd give it a go. We thought, well, we've got 1 cycle left. We've got approval from the NHS. Yes, you can have that last cycle as egg donation because of what's happened before. So we thought, actually, we've been given a rare opportunity. We should really think about using it. And also, just to make things even more difficult at that point, I by then moved into running the egg donation programme where I was working. Which I'd been doing probably for about 18 months, which I'd I loved it, always wanted to do. I managed the recipient list, loved it. And I thought, it's going to get even more interesting.
Yeah. My mind's blown thinking how you manage the logistics of confidentiality, boundaries, all the rest of it with the donor, with your team. But on a practical note, what is beautiful to hear, so many people think I've got to be 100% ready and I've got to have healed. And I kind of think you get to a point where you're comfy enough, and we don't healing, we just learn to carry stuff better, which feels definitely how you found it for you as well.
Yeah, definitely. It was carrying it better and thinking, right, where do we go from here?
How did you choose your donor? How did you know that was a donor that was good enough for you and Dave to move forward with treatment?
So Bourne were really good. They reworked kind of the program for me in terms of that they found a possible donor which they offered to me. My work wife, Jackie, she won't mind me saying, Jackie ran the donor side and I ran the recipients, and we used to call each other our work wives. We still do. We have a brilliant friendship. We did have a brilliant professional relationship. So I trust her to find me the donor that's right for me. They offered me a donor, and so I was kind of in that, that same sort of group as a patient when you get that call. So I always say to people, for patients, it's a bit like the NHS when you get that call and they're offering you a kidney. It's very much like that, because you get that call and you're going to make from the professional point of view, you're going to ring someone and make them potentially really happy by saying, we've got a donor to offer you. And then from the patient point of view, you think, wow, they have got someone for me. This is amazing. And they offered me a lady that was a really, really good match. And I really liked it because she was much taller than me. So I'm really short. So I thought, this will work really well because my husband's really tall. So, what more could a girl want? And I thought, yep, that's the one. And I think we waited on the list just the same as all the other patients. So we'd waited about a year. And then at that point, we got given that opportunity. So it was, even looking back now, I just remember we were really, really excited at that point.
I think as well, just your body language is beautiful there, because I think a lot of people go in looking for an egg donor with a spreadsheet in the head. And it's very much that feeling as to actually, does this feel manageable to move forward with? So it's beautiful that it felt right for you.
It definitely felt right.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked at the little things, because the little things are what's important. So the most important things I remember about it was that she had a similar hair colour to me. And like you say, she was taller. And I thought, that's amazing. I thought, that's great. Because, everything else will be up to chance and whatever gets thrown up in the magic gene pool that we all has to happen for all of us to be here.
Was Dave instantly in agreement as well? Was he ready when your donor was offered?
Dave's a really positive person, so he was really excited. And I think for him, he didn't necessarily have that additional weight of knowing all the ins and outs. So I was really able to say to him, this is our opportunity. This is the lady that they're offering for us. And yeah, he was like, yep, that looks good straight away. Yeah, he was really, really happy to do that.
And just remind me, apologies, Kate, what year was your treatment?
So this would have been back end of 2016.
So quite a few years after the change in the law.
A few years ago now. I've got many more grey hairs since then. So I would have been 36, 37 at that point. Treatment didn't start till 2017, but this would have been the back end of 2016 when the offer, you got the offer, and all the planning and the synchronization was all happening, because at that point it was a fresh synchronization. So obviously now things have moved on and changed, that a lot of clinics are freezing eggs first, but this was a fresh coordinated cycle.
And the law had changed quite a few years before then with the removal of anonymity. I'm aware we've got quite a few people listening online live, which is great to hear, and people from all around the world. Just, I'm wondering how important for you mentioned you'd had implications counselling. Was it important to have an identifiable donor who a child would be able to access the identifying information of the donor in the future, or was that not as important for you?
No, for us it was really important, and it wasn't just because of me working in the field. We just Dave is quite an open person, and I could never work for MI5 because I'll just say completely everything and my face will reveal it all. So we had already decided that we would be open, and we didn't feel that it was something that needed to not be talked about. So definitely the change in the law for us was something that was beneficial, and we liked the idea that you would give that potential child a choice in the future. And I'd already looked, I think I'd been to a conference the year before. I think the year before in 2015, I'd been to ESHRA. I think it was my first time going. So again, went with the Born Work family. And I think I'd been to a talk about how children born after their donation, if they know about it, from the beginning, how relaxed and better they deal with it. And I remember just thinking, yeah, that makes sense, because you're not springing it on them. So for us, we thought, well, we would just always tell them, and we would, probably would have got some of the books from the donor conception unit to the place online and find out, so for us, that was how we were going to approach it.
So you'd thought about it, felt comfy in your body, you were ready to go, you'd been offered this donor, into treatment with your work family. How did it go?
Treatment wise, it was pretty much as expected. We I put my teeth in. I had the normal treatment you would expect for a recipient. So I had HRT initially, which gave me a regular cycle. So I was feeling much better at that point, having a bit more stability. And then at the time, the clinic were using a mock cycle and then a fresh, the coordinated cycle. And my lovely work wife, Jackie, coordinated all that. I don't know how Jackie coped with it. She must have had lots of lovely alcohol and cigarettes, I'm sure. bless her. But yeah, from that point of view, treatment went pretty much textbook, and most importantly for the donor as well. On egg collection day, after Dave had obviously come to the clinic to produce his sample, we did the traditional, we went to McDonald's on the way home. I still remember us sitting in McDonald's in Colchester thinking, oh, this is really strange. There's a lady having an egg collection for me, and I'm sitting in McDonald's ordering, you know, breakfast and a hash brownie, and you know, Dave's just been and produced his sample, and then we kind of went home and waited. And I still remember getting the call from the embryologists sort of in the afternoon, and you know, the number, I think, saying we've got six eggs for you. So I thought, yeah, this feels okay. And then the feelings were just the same the following morning when I got a call from one of the lovely embryologists, just the same as had it been with my own eggs. You've still got that same feeling of tenterhooks. And even though you know what they're going to tell you and you know why they're calling you, your brain's kind of split into two, that half of your brain's saying, well, they're going to be calling you for a FERT update and they're going to say A, B, C, D, E. And the other half's going, oh, it's the embryologist. Oh, what are they going to say? What's going to happen? So you're kind of trying to keep that part of your brain behaving and in check and going, just be quiet, you know what they're going to do. And the other half then going, well, stop being so scientific and boring. So you kind of have that incongruence in your mind. But we had really, really good news. I think 4 out of the 6 had fertilized. And yeah, things carried on to the textbook. And by the time we'd come for our embryo transfer, there was 2 beautiful blastocysts. One was able to be frozen and one was transferred. And I still have the picture on my desk. I'm looking at it now. It is a beautiful blastocyst. It always will be.
Validates your journey and makes it real.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember going home with the picture. And I remember the consultant saying to me, now just go home and relax. And I thought, yeah, I will. And I did for that day. Dave and I watched some TV and we chilled out and we kind of waited. And we, like every patient, I carried on working, keep busy. Dave carried on as normal. My mum was horrified that at that point I was running, and my mum was horrified that I was running. And I thought, well, why wouldn't I be? And at that point, I think it was February time. I remember the weather wasn't too bad, so I carried on going out for like some runs and getting some fresh air. And at that point, yeah, things were all pretty much routine. And on the day of our test, Dave went and ran across country in the morning. I sat watching him drinking hot chocolate and cream, naughty, but those that know me know that's not a surprise. And we waited, and I said, well, I don't want to do the test before you run across country. I said, let's do it when you get back. So he was like, okay. So I remember us coming back, and we did the test, and I thought, oh, I don't think it's worked. I can't see another line. And I've never seen another line on a test for me. It's never happened. Yeah. I thought, no, I can't see it. So I came out, I said to Dad, no, I don't think it's worked. And I handed it, and he said, let me have another look. I said, oh, stop being ridiculous. He said, no. And I remember him getting his torch on his phone and standing in the window. And I'd just gone and sat. I think I was sitting in the room I'm in now. And he said, no, you're wrong. I said, what do you mean I'm wrong? I said, no. And he said, there's a line. And I said, no, don't be silly. And there was a line. There was a faint line. And I thought, wowzers. Well, I said another word that I probably shouldn't say. You imagine that it's all going to be happy, but yeah, I said another word, I think, out of shock because I'd never seen it before. It never happened to me. That's what happened to my friends or patients. And I thought, oh, okay, right, here we go.
And that initial, yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster going through treatment. Often it ramps up once the reality of a pregnancy is there. How were those early days?
The early days were quite good. Those couple of days, I remember going back to work, and I remember, yeah, I was really optimistic, and obviously everyone was really, really happy, and I really supportive, which was great. So, and I'm breaking it down into days because you'll understand why. But initially, the first couple of days, yeah, really quite optimistic, and I thought, okay. I started to feel a little bit sick and a bit strange. I thought, well, this must be what it's all about. I remember sitting in the scan room scanning patients thinking, oh, I feel a bit sick. Okay, that's fine, you know. And then I thought, no, you're imagining it, you know, Dr. Google and, you know, no. But no, initially the first couple of days, quite positive. I think it was at that point that I think I told my mum at that point, because I'd been a bit naughty. We hadn't really mentioned a lot to family and friends about what we were doing. They knew that it was happening, but they didn't know when, because
Okay.
we didn't want like loads of extra. Have you had your scan? What's happening? Have you had this? So they knew that it was coming, but they didn't know when. So I think it was then that, yeah, Dave told his parents, and I told my mum, and she went, I knew you were up to something.
And that excitement can just sometimes put more pressure on, and sometimes you can just all celebrate together.
Yeah, that was the plan. So yeah, at that point, family and friends were kind of all new. Dave's very open. He just likes to say it as it is. So yeah, the first few days were optimistic.
And then as word got out at work that you were pregnant, was there support at work? Did you work?
Everyone was really supportive. You've ever met the team that worked at Bourne when we were, the period of time we're talking about, it was really the A team. We're talking in 2016 to 2017, 18. So yeah, really, really supportive, very much a family affair, cautiously optimistic, but really supportive. We had a lot of hugs.
And tell me how your pregnancy progressed.
Well, that is where things got a bit more interesting. So I think probably by about maybe 5 days, a week after that, things started to change. I started to feel quite unwell. And again, initially I thought, oh, you're just probably being a wimp, and it's just, being pregnant, and, you'll get used to it. But it wasn't really what I was expecting. So, and apologies to those that are listening who might be eating or have eaten their dinner. But it started with quite personal symptoms. I started to get really, really severe genital swelling, itching, pain, to the point where it just felt like really, really painful, and almost like your genitals are on fire. That's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah.
And it just appeared out of nowhere. It started very small. I just remember sitting there thinking, no, this is really uncomfortable. So I had a lovely team. I'm going to call them the team, it's easier. And straight away, they changed my medication, because why wouldn't you just think the obvious? You're just having a reaction, or your hormones are a little bit out of balance. We've all had thrush and various kind of things happen. Yeah, that will solve it. So I thought, I just thought, that will sort it out. But I think by then things started to progress at lightning speed, really. Tried again with the different medication, but the swelling and the pain got worse, to the point where I was literally sitting on ice packs most of the day. And if I wasn't doing that, it was really, really painful. And then you're in that conundrum in early pregnancy. You don't want to take too much, and you don't want to, put anything at risk. But equally, you're sitting there thinking, I can't really cope with this. I can't sit in a cold bath all day, or just stay under a shower or an ice pack. So again, went back to the team, changed my medication to injectable progesterone. Not pleasant, but a lot of the patients can do it really well. And at that point, you will do anything. You'll think, yep, that's fine. I can put up with it. It wasn't too bad, actually. You wouldn't line up for it. But
were there other symptoms beside the swelling and pain?
I think looking back, there was. And again, anyone that knows me, I stopped eating. And anyone that knows me, I'm a bit of a chocoholic. I know I'm supposed to be talking to patients about being healthy, and but I'm a bit of a chocoholic. I like my cakes and cookies. I shouldn't be eating as many as I am. I'm trying, but and I stopped eating pretty much. I couldn't look at food, and initially I thought, that's just being pregnant, but couldn't eat a thing really. I think I used to live on an apple, a bit of porridge, and water, and that was it for the day. It's the only time the amount of weight I lost. It's unheard of. Never happened to me at any other point.
How far past test day did you?
Probably about 2 weeks, maybe about 1.5 to 2 weeks. So really couldn't eat, and then at that point couldn't sleep. And again, I didn't initially put that down to just anxiety or being worried, but didn't matter what I did, couldn't sleep at all. And it was only from having a conversation with Dave about it, went from kind of being relatively quite calm to being kind of like someone had literally just cranked me up. So looking back, definitely. And then I changed onto the injectable progesterone, and I thought, right, okay. And at that point, I'd also been down to the gynecology department at Colchester, again with one of the wonderful team members who worked there, got me in to see another consultant. They gave me steroids and creams to treat the genital issue. And they did work really, really well. I'd been to the walk-in centre, I think, on the weekend. They had no idea, and kind of, bless them, they were like, is it an STI? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. Is it this? No. They gave me some steroids, so they'd started to work. And then I'd gone back to see another lovely consultant at the General, and they gave me some more really high dose steroid creams to use, and that did really work. And then by then I'd changed onto the injectable medication, and Dave and I kind of thought, yeah, we can get a hold of this. It's been a bit of a nasty reaction. We'll get a hold of it. And I remember at that point he said, why don't you take another pregnancy test? And I said, well, why do I want to do that? He went, just take one and see. So off he trots. And he came back and we took it, and the red line just came up straight away, rather than with the torchlight. And it was at that moment we both thought, yeah, this will turn around now. This will put all this behind us. It'll turn around. So we had a couple of days where it wasn't too bad. I was still kind of wearing quite loose trousers, and I can't remember. I don't think I was working at that point. I think at that point I'd stopped working because it just wasn't a good idea me doing work. And I couldn't kind of wear my uniform. So I think I'd stopped working at that point. So yeah, we thought at that point, yeah, things will turn around. But I think within about 2 days of being on the injectables, I remember sitting at Dave's parents', and it was February. And I was sat in a T-shirt with my back up against a patio door because it was cold. And I didn't realise at the time, but I was starting to kind of get that overheating feeling again. But it was kind of it wasn't kind of in the pelvic area, it was all across my body. And I remember leaving his parents, and I just scratched myself on my neck. And then it was almost like that was the kind of instant I kind of got covered in this really horrible looking rash. It was bizarre, really bizarre, literally all over my trunk, over my groin, all the way over my back, and around my neck and my ears. It was bizarre.
And had you ever heard of anything like this before, or was it completely just acknowledging you're a nurse, you were working in fertility, you work with people in early pregnancy who've had successful treatment? Was this anywhere on your radar of the realm of possibility?
Not really. I've seen patients have, some mild rashes and some mild reactions to medications, just like lots of other medics have. And we've offered those same treatments, steroids or antihistamines or whatever. But I hadn't really seen someone with all of those symptoms where, you've got severe rashes, you've got severe hormonal cognitive symptoms, and you've got things like genital swelling, and you've got things like rashes, and to the point where you're kind of not functioning would be the word I would use. So I'd kind of wake up in the morning and sit in a cold bath, and then kind of just try and function throughout the day with various degrees of non-functioning would be the word looking back. Just feels
so scary. And so you're driving back from his parents, this rash is starting to cover your body. Where'd you go? What'd you do?
Exactly. And looking back, I'm not sure I was thinking clearly, which I don't think you would be if you've not been sleeping, really. If you look back, you think you've not been sleeping, you've been dealing with a roller coaster of emotions, hormones, and various drugs and things, and something's going on, but you're not exactly sure what. I think I kind of went into survival mode, which for me initially was kind of, well, I want to hide at home, and I want to see if I can, deal with it. So I think at that point, that's exactly what I tried to do. Probably not great. My mum, bless her, was on holiday, and I know at that point I think she'd rang me in the morning one day, and I wasn't great, and she said, "Right, I'm coming off holiday. I'll come and look after you." And then you think, oh God, it's got to be serious if your mum, when you're 37, is coming back. But I think that was nice for Dave because he kind of didn't have much of a break from it. He would go to work, and he worked nights at the time. He would go to work, and then he would come back, and I would be in some degree of unfunctionality. And bless him, he probably thought, God, what am I coming home to? So I think it was nice for him to take the pressure off a bit.
I think you really need that support around you. And what happened next? I'm sat here, I'm sure everyone listening is just relieved that you're here looking so well.
It was a huge roller coaster. At that point, again, the team at the clinic, we had a lot of conversations. To be honest, I don't think I told them how ill I was. And I think looking back, that was a fear I had, that you don't want to admit that actually this is something that you've no idea what it is and you can't handle it. You try and put a brave face on it. And I've always used humour as a coping mechanism. That's just me. That's part of, also it gets you through things when you're working in healthcare. But looking back, I don't think I could admit to myself how bad it actually was. So I think that was partly an issue. But I think it was definitely a roller coaster. But I think by the time I think I was getting close to probably about being at that 6 weeks by then. And it seems like it's not that long, but for me, it felt like an eternity. Every day just felt like an eternity. And we had that conversation. Do you want to carry on, or, do you want to stop the medication? We think it might be the medication. And Dave and I had the conversation. I'd also been to my own GP to make sure there wasn't anything we were missing. And to be fair, he was very good. Again, very lucky. It wasn't where we are now when you call 85 in the queue. He saw me, did bloods, even rang me, I think, 2 or 3 times, because I kind of walked in and he said, "There's something wrong with you, isn't there?" And I said, "Yeah." So, that from that point of view, we kind of felt we'd covered everything. So we made the agonising decision that, I think we'd stop the medication, because I just don't think I could have carried on. I genuinely don't think it was something I could have carried on.
And when you make that decision to stop the medication, who is there for you? How do you make a decision beyond stopping the medication?
I think initially you think about the short-term things. So initially the short-term decision was you want the kind of symptoms and the pain that you're in to stop. And from Dave's point of view, he doesn't want me to feel like I'm going through it. So I think initially we only thought about the short term. We knew deep down the long term would be very difficult, because if I wasn't taking the medication that was needed for someone with POI, you haven't got your own hormones to fall back on. So once you stop the progesterone and the other medications, then we kind of knew that chances it wasn't going to be great. So, but we weighed it up, and that was the decision that we came to.
Yeah. How soon after stopping the medication did you start to feel better?
A long time. So initially I thought, great, I'll stop the medication. Hopefully, I'll be the 1 in 1 million and things will cling on. I would drive to work playing certain songs in my car, and you really try to be positive and powerful songs, But
so you went back to work?
I think I was working at that point. I think I was, or I was trying to. I think they were trying to send me home, it wasn't them, it was me. I was desperate for normality. I was absolutely desperate to go back to normal. I wanted to have my normal routine. I wanted to have my normal support networks, both at work and at home. And it's almost kind of like a survival mechanism, like you just want it to go away. And I think that's what had kicked in. So at that point, I thought, no. But I think probably about 4 or 5 days after that was when I started to bleed. And again, poor Dave, it always sounds like he's at work. He was at work. And as crazy as it sounds, I went round to visit my friend on the evening, and I knew what was happening and didn't tell her. I just wasn't ready to admit it. And she'd probably say to me now, "Why didn't you say?" And I just wasn't ready to admit it, because if I said something, that would mean it was true. So I went round and had. She says, "Come around, just have a cup of tea, get out the house," because I must have not been working at that point. She said, "Get out the house, don't stay in all day, just have a cup of tea and go home." So that's what I did. And I came back and I thought, God, I must be really mad. I haven't said anything. And I just thought, but I waited until David got home to tell him, because I thought, well, there's no point telling him when he's at work. It's not going to, help him. And then kind of breaking the news, I think that was probably the lowest point, because you just think you've gone through all of that and it hasn't worked. Even though I still hadn't had my scan, I kind of knew that was it, game over.
And apologies for jumping straight in and asking such personal questions, but were you able to miscarry naturally, or did you need surgical assistance?
No, it's not. It's an important question. It all happened naturally quite quickly. For me, it wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't that painful. And then I did go for my scan the week after, just to make sure. And I think that was also really hard, because all of my lovely work family kind of all knew, and we kind of had a little cry. So, yeah.
And just thinking, I asked before how quickly you started to feel better. My hope was it would have been quite soon. How did you, just acknowledging you're physically beaten, and then you go through the trauma of pregnancy loss after your fertility treatment journey, how have you thrived? Because you have achieved so much and gone on to do so much. Because it feels like you're very good at giving yourself time. How did you know when to shift? How did you know when to move?
I think initially there were some really dark times after. We often kind of just think we better focus on the positives, but there were some really dark times. I didn't get better straight away. It was really difficult. I had a lot of symptoms. I struggled. I still had skin rashes, couldn't sleep. At that point, I wasn't putting on any weight. So yeah, and there was a lot of cognitive symptoms. I'd been back to the GP, who kind of didn't really know what to do. And I was kind of in a little bit of limbo, really. So I think at that point, that was really, really difficult. And again, it was actually my work wife that said to me, I think you really need to see someone else to get this, to find out what happened. And again, at that point, I was kind of in denial and was like, no, I'm just really unlucky, But then I thought, no, actually, I should. So I went to see a specialist, a professor in reproductive medicine. And that was really, really an important moment, because I got a diagnosis of severe progesterone hypersensitivity. Because even at that point, I was thinking, maybe I've just imagined all this. Maybe it's all, in my head. But you kind of know that it's something unusual when the professor gets his iPad out and starts making notes. You think, oh, this is obviously interesting him. But he was very, very good. He had seen it before, not in many patients. But his kind of first suggestions really stuck with us, which were, because we still had that embryo in storage, which was always in the back of our minds. He kind of said, well, I can't tell you when you'll feel better, because everybody's different and there's not many people who've had this severity. But, hopefully over time you will. And he kind of said, I said, what would your advice be? And he said straight away, use a surrogate, because of the severity of the reaction. Use a surrogate. And I kind of say, well, I'm not sure that's what we want to do. And bless him, he did go away and come up with a plan using a variety of medications and trial runs with different progesterones and steroids and antihistamines and various things. So he did go away and put a plan together, which was great. But I think because I'd been so unwell and things had been so difficult, and then I'd spent so long working on feeling better again, I was really lucky. I had counselling. I did cognitive behaviour therapy, because I was really conscious these symptoms aren't going to go away. So I've got to learn to kind of live with it for a bit and work it through. So rather than getting into a meltdown that I don't feel well, I can't sleep, understand how to deal with it a little better, so that you're giving yourself a bit more of an opportunity. I worked on getting a regime with my own hormones back again, and I worked on various different aspects, meditation, lots of different things to kind of start to feel better again. And that took quite a long time, but I think it was the right move. And then ultimately we made the decision that we wouldn't carry on, because we just felt for us it would be too much. I wasn't overly keen on using a surrogate, and Dave wasn't understandably overly keen on me going through that again, because, I'd gotten to the point there were moments when I was that ill that I kind of sat there and thought, I wonder if I'll be here the next day. And again, my own, we just thought, that's not the plan for us. It was not an easy decision. We didn't make it lightly. We kept the frozen embryo in storage for probably about a year before we made the decision. Again, time. But for us, we just thought, no, we'll stop here. It ends with us.
And making that decision to stop, and I routinely say to clients when I'm working with them for counselling, don't try and plan it in your head, because your head is like a spreadsheet, and your body, if your feet aren't going to carry you forward, you need to pause, listen to what your body's doing. And it feels you gave yourself that gift of time to just move at a pace that worked for you?
Time was important. I tried lots of different things at that point, but the time was important to make sure that, you know, we felt it was the right thing for us.
And embracing being a family of two with fur little person or little ones there, fur babies, was that a decision that you were both in the same place at the same time, or did either of you go off on an alternative nurturing tangent to explore other options? Or
I think this was the one positive. We'd ended. We hadn't. What were we doing? We hadn't donated it. We hadn't donated the embryo to research and ended officially. But about sort of a couple of months after I'd seen the professor, we kind of had an idea that this was what we wanted to do, and we just, as ridiculous as it sounds, we just said, let's get a dog. And I went to have my hair cut, and my hairdresser said, oh, there's a great rescue down the road. You should go look. And we were like, well, we're not going to get a dog yet. No, you should go look. So, of course, we go down there, and they brought out this lovely little tiny puppy, 17 weeks old. And they said, oh, this is a lovely puppy, but someone else is having her. And I thought, why are they bringing her to see us? You know, it's like parading past with a dairy milk. And then I realised that they weren't keen on the owners that she'd been offered. And then they've obviously seen us. And they said, oh, after we'd sat with her for a bit, they said, would you like to be considered? And we were like, Dave was like, immediately, yes, put my name down. And he was literally, and we were like, yeah, okay. So yeah, that's what we did. And Dave was like a kid in a sweet shop. I remember I'd gone away to a nurses conference in Leeds, and he's messaging me, when are we having the home check? When are they coming? When are we getting the dog? Why isn't the dog here? When's the dog coming? So I think it was a real positive, and we were just given such a positivity, because she's unbiased. She's a lovely dog. Those that know her name's Lottie. She loves everyone. She's got a great nature. She was just given to us at such an important time when we needed something else to focus on and something else to love and fill the hole. And that's what she did. She filled the place in our hearts. And yeah, we then went from 1 to 4. But that wasn't straight away. That was over a period of time. But
I'm smiling now because we've got 3. Apologies, I can just hear them in the background if you've got a bit of woofing going on in the background there. Just thinking about that, just the physicality of you sharing about Dave's excitement and enthusiasm. I think sometimes you need that positivity, don't you? You need something tangible that you can physically hold on to.
For him, I think it was really important, because no matter what they say, I generally think that men and women deal with things in different ways. So I did have a lot of counselling, and I took that up, but Dave had a couple of sessions of counselling, but not so much. So I think the way that we process things can be different. And for him, it was like the key in the lock. It gave him purpose, and it gave him something to focus on. He'd take the dog for a walk, and it got him. I think if he hadn't have had that, I think he would have found it really, really difficult, because it gets you out, it gets you into nature, it gets you talking to people, and it gets you a routine. And I think that's, you know, and our dogs, if anyone who knows us, Dave treats our dogs like queens and kings. You all want to come back to be our dogs, because they are, you know, rotten beyond an end that you'd ever imagine.
And just thinking about that transitional phase, your signal's breaking up a little bit, Kate, but I can still hear you, so I'm hoping things are going to carry on fine. Just thinking about that transitional phase and that time you gave yourself, how did you cope at work at that point?
It was difficult. I probably wasn't that kind to myself looking back, Tracey, again, because I was craving normality, and I was craving to go back to where I was. I wanted to, initially, I think my thought process was, well, I want to erase everything that's happened and go back to a routine where it wasn't a horrible experience. So I think I did have at that point, I think I did get signed off. I had a few weeks off. We had a holiday, and then kind of I went back to work on a phased return. Physically, I think I would have struggled otherwise. But yeah, I did go back to work, and then things carried on. I then changed jobs. because again, I found it quite difficult just kind of being in the same space. And I've always wondered whether my work family found that difficult as well. So it was a bit of a bumpy ride, I think.
But you've found your space. You've claimed lots of different families now. I know just how many different networks you work in. We've had quite a few questions not coming through publicly that have been sent. I've just made a couple of notes of things that people had wanted to ask. Because Kate's story is such an inspirational story of strength after loss, quite often in our realm we hear about, sadly, terminations of pregnancies for medical reasons. But elective loss for your physical health is much rarer, and it is such a privilege and an honour to have you here to share how things have been. Just so people know, I'll put a little note in the chat how people can reach out if they've got questions or want to connect with you. But what do you want listeners to take away from your story about resilience and determination? Because it just feels you've got it by the bucket load.
I think my takeaway points would be, if you're worried about a particular symptom, if you're a patient or something that's unusual, it can be really scary, but do go and ask. The team I had didn't know all the answers, but they supported me. And I think if I could stress enough, if you're worried about a symptom, we don't always know the answers, but support is there. But I think also to never presume things are always run of the mill. This is an extraordinary case if you looked at it from a medical point of view. It's not going to happen to lots of other people, but it has a huge impact. So I think having understanding, and I'm just an ordinary girl. It happens. These things happen, and it's never an easy decision to end the path, either end the journey or end the treatment that is likely to end the pregnancy. But sometimes those hard decisions have to be made. But you might seem okay on the outside, and you usually are. But there is, even now, I can't think how many years, 7 years down the line, there's still some triggers occasionally that will throw me off guard, and you'll think, oh, you're back. So it's with you all the time, and it's a huge learning experience. It's a huge learning curve. Nobody knows all the answers, but it's a huge learning curve. And if there are healthcare professionals taking the time to watch this, if you've just taken that one thing away and thought, actually, there are rarities like me where your body doesn't like your own hormones. It doesn't happen often, but it happens. And you just never know who the next person might be. And if you're a patient watching it, then I hope that it gives you a little bit of greater understanding about people's journeys, that a lot of journeys don't always end with what we want. Sometimes we have to think we are on that new path regardless, that new norm. And for me, eventually, once I'd started feeling better, it was, well, how do I turn this around into a positive? Because you've got two options. You either kind of let it own you, or over time you try to own it. And I think over time that's been my approach. And I just never wanted a patient to kind of feel a bit like I did at times, which was partly my own doing, where I would just sit upstairs and think, what am I going to do with this? What's going to happen here? How am I going to solve this? I'd want them to feel that they can reach out to a trusted person.
And I always think the greatest gift we can give is our time. And I just want to thank you for your time this evening, but also acknowledge just how much time you put into educating, sharing resources. I've included the link for your LinkedIn profile, because there's quite often really fabulous things that are shared on Kate's LinkedIn, both about POI and menopause.
I think if I hadn't have gone through this experience, I'm not sure I would be on this path. So, I wouldn't be on this path now. I wouldn't be doing a PhD. I probably wouldn't be, lecturing and educating. I just don't think that would have happened. I think it just made me think, actually, there is a positive I can do here. I can really pursue a passion, and I can really give it my best shot. And also, I'm stubborn. I'm like, I want this mashed brain to get working again. It's not going to just sit there and be mashed full of hormones that it doesn't like. I'm going to get it up and running again, which also took a lot of time. I had a lot of cognitive symptoms, memory problems, brain fog. So I think finding something for me was important.
And thank you, Kate, so much. We do need to finish. If
Yeah,
you've
thank
got
you to everyone for
questions,
listening.
reach out, get in touch. You know how to contact us. There was a question about how to find a clinic. Please do have a look at the My IVF Answers website. Have a look at the European Fertility Society.
Yeah.
Lots of guidance and suggestions on there as well. And Kate and mine's contact details are available for you. But I look forward to joining you next month. Let me just flip the little presentation over. There you go. I just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening.
Everyone for listening.
And thank you to Kate, and I look forward to seeing everyone next month. Take care, everyone.